Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show, where you'll find health and fitness inspiration, motivation, and information shared in 15-minute episodes. Tune in while getting a move on to make leading and enjoying the benefits of a healthy lifestyle almost too easy. It's the Fit 15. And now your host, Catherine Basu.
Welcome to the Fit 15 podcast show. I'm your host, Catherine Basu, and my guest today is Courtney Poullas, who has been on the show before. I'm really excited to have her back because it's giving me an excuse to talk about running, my favorite topic. I know this week we've been kind of really not talking about running at all, now that I'm thinking back. We did have on Jimena Dosadelli, the race director of the Winding Trails Triathlon Series, which has a running component and is very beginner friendly, but that was not a running focused episode. So excited to break that non-running streak today. Do want to encourage you though to listen to any of the episodes this week. They're all amazing, but the episode with Jimena, because not only does she explain more about that amazing beginner friendly triathlon series that happens this summer, but Jimena is also a 2-time Olympian in mountain biking, and she did share some tips with us. So don't miss out on that episode at another point after getting your dose of running inspiration from today's guest, Courtney Poullas, who will be our guest today and tomorrow. I did have to break our conversation up into 2 parts because we had a lot to catch up on. I first met Courtney online on Instagram, as I meet many people these days, and just was really inspired by her running journey as a mom. She was actually running during her pregnancy. So she was on for an episode to talk about that. Courtney also has a background as a teacher, and she's a running coach. So she created a planner to help you run in spite of your busy mom schedule. You can find that on Etsy, and we talked about that in one of our episodes. And then she's back today. I had to have her back because she just completed her first marathon. So that's what we're going to talk about. For those of you who don't know Courtney, she's a distance runner, mom of 3, and English teacher, as I mentioned. She's been running since 2014, and her first marathon was the Pittsburgh Marathon, the Dick's Sporting Goods Pittsburgh Marathon. She hopes to complete many more marathons in the future. Welcome back to the podcast, Courtney. I'm so excited to have you as my guest today.
I'm excited to be back.
So I had to get you on the podcast because you are now an official marathoner. So congratulations.
Thank you. And I tell everyone that. I'm a marathoner now, everybody.
I mean, there's lots of jokes about, how do you know, right? If someone's run a marathon or if they're a marathoner, they'll tell you, right? Or there's multiple versions of that. But sure, you should tell people it's a big accomplishment. So
yes.
So what had you set your sights on wanting to do this crazy thing to run a marathon?
Well, so when I started running, I ran my first half marathon. That was okay. And then I ran my second one. My second one was Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just felt at that point like a marathon was the next step. This was a few years ago. So I registered for the full Pittsburgh Marathon. Mm-hmm. And I realized I just wasn't ready to do it. So I dropped out of that. And then I registered for like a couple more over the years thinking like, oh, okay, now I'm ready to do it. And I just couldn't do it yet. I knew I wasn't ready to do it. And then this last year, after I'd been run coaching for a while, and after I kind of felt like I really knew myself as a runner and understood my paces and how to train, I was thinking about it. And then a good friend of mine, she had her second child. He had some kind of serious complications when he was born. And that was kind of like the motivator. She lives all the way in Utah. It's actually someone I haven't met in person before. We just became really good friends from being moms and being in a couple Facebook groups together. Sure. But that was like the icing on the cake. I'm like, okay, I know I can do it. And I just really feel inspired to want to use all of my abilities and really give this a go for this little boy who is in the NICU right now. So that's really how I made the decision.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's something I find with clients, like you really have to have a strong why, like a reason that you're going to do it is so powerful and can really keep you, because, there's days when you don't want to put on your running shoes or you're tired or, and just having a bigger purpose than that is really, really huge. So that's really cool. You think you guys will meet at some point?
I think so. I hope so. I keep telling my husband, even before I met her, Utah is such a beautiful state. So I'd love to go there sometime.
Yeah, I never realized that. And then my husband's a big skier. I like to cross country ski. I like to stay close to the ground, but we went to Salt Lake City and then up to, what's the Snowbird. And, I was just like, wow, this is a really, really awesome state. And there's so much to do, so definitely. Yeah, and we'll hope you get to get out there one day.
Yeah,
okay. So you had that inspiration. And then, so how long did you train for to do the marathon then? Once deciding like this was the year.
Well, it was in, I think, I'm going to say either November or December that I decided to give it a go, or maybe even, it was somewhere at the end of 2019. I don't remember exactly what month, but I started training then. So I was training for I gave myself about 5 months to train for it because I wouldn't say newly postpartum, but my son was 9 or 10 months old. So I was still kind of getting back on my feet after having a baby.
Right.
So I really am okay, I have to be smart about this and give myself enough time to build a base up before I even really start, quote, marathon training. So I gave myself a good 5.5 or 6 months to start training.
Mm-hmm. And I guess for people who hadn't listened to your other episodes, that's kind of how it seems like this was just yesterday that you were pregnant, but obviously that's not true anymore. Time has flown.
He's 15 months old. He's 15 months. It's crazy.
Wow. And that's kind of how we connected, was that and this is your story on this is in another episode, but you ran through your pregnancy, which is very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really helped my mindset when I was doing this training. It was kind of the same mentality that you develop and earn from running a marathon or from marathon training, that you can do hard stuff even when you don't want to. So I'm glad I made the decision to continue to run through all 40 weeks of the pregnancy, because I kept telling myself, you're waddling along on the treadmill at 19 minutes per mile. You can get up and you can run and do this training. So yeah, it helped.
Hi friends, it's Catherine, and that sound was your halfway point reminder if you are joining us and using the episode to get in an out and back 15-minute walk, and that's the only time you have, you'll want to turn around now. All right, back to my conversation with Courtney. You ran mostly through your pregnancy, and then when did you get back to running after that? Because you said the 5 months is for marathon training in particular, but how soon were you able to get back to just any kind of running?
I started I had a C-section, and I started after 3 weeks under my doctor's guidance.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of atypical, but I really tried. I don't want to wait 6 weeks. I really tried really hard to take care of myself leading up to the C-section and afterwards, which was making me stir crazy.
Right.
I didn't take any of the narcotic pain relievers afterwards. I stuck to Advil only, and I really kept myself sitting still. And I think those two things combined for 2 weeks straight really helped me heal up and get back on my feet after 3 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's definitely atypical. But if you've been running before and you're healthy, that kind of just speaks to that, right? That you obviously talk to your doctor, but could be better. Yeah. So that's awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So you had the 5 months of training, and we talked about this a little bit before we got started, but how did the training go once you got out there and considering that you haven't had a newborn at the beginning of it?
I'm just laughing because there were so many things. So the initial goal was to run a 4:30, which is based on the Jack Daniels VDOT system. I use VDOT to train myself and my athletes. So based on my half marathon PR of 2:11 and 47 seconds, I was aiming for 4:30. This is where I feel like I'm a newbie still, even though I was a running coach and I coached other marathoners. I really wasn't thinking. Pittsburgh is, I think there's about 1,300 feet of elevation gain. One hill, they call it the halfway hill, has about 900 feet of that elevation gain. So
okay.
So I've set out, I'm okay, I'm going to train for 4:30. And then, not remembering about the hills, and then that I have 3 kids who just pass sickness around it's crazy. So I was doing okay. I wasn't hitting all the paces, but I was doing okay running 5 days a week and at least getting the mileage in. But then right when I was about to get to 35 miles a week, which is as like ending sort of peak weeks of training, things just like fell apart. My daughter got sick with this horrific cold. She gave it to the baby. The oldest one was spared somehow, but then my husband got it and I got it. And this is the sickest I've been in like years. So I would say like a month before the race, I ran 16 miles and then I barely ran after that.
Oh man. Yeah.
So I had like a month off and I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. So I kind of just changed my goals from running a 4:30 to I'm just going to try to enjoy this and finish it. And I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. So you enjoyed it, you finished it. And I think actually before we even say that, I mean, you and I were talking about this before. It's so hard because when you miss a week, you want to try to, I guess the mentality often becomes you want to make that up no matter what part of your training cycle you're in. But definitely have to stress for the listeners that you never want to try to like make up for lost time at any part, like by adding in all your extra miles. And that's a good way to get injured. But definitely not that close to the race.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to talk about that a little bit just because you are a running coach, just to give some insights on that and like why you stuck to that, even though, you essentially had an extended taper and maybe didn't feel as prepared in that last month?
Yeah. So like I said, I ran 16 miles and I came down with this cold and I was off my feet for 2 weeks. And then by that point, there were 2 weeks left to go, which is when we should be tapering. And I kept obsessing, like I should be running, one more 16 miler or 18 miler or 20 miler. But I knew that if I did that, I wasn't going to give my muscles any recovery that they needed. And I knew how important it was to make sure my muscles were fully intact and back to their typical strength by the time I got to the start line. So as difficult as it was, I knew that I had to really focus on taking it easy and just doing, a few easy runs here and there if I could. So my body knew what to do when I got there. But yeah, definitely don't want to start tacking on a bunch of extra miles here and there just to make up for it because you'll get hurt. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like in other areas of life. Right.
Yeah, It's hard to sit there and feel like I'm going into this unprepared, but, part of me feels like maybe I could have run it a little bit quicker if I would have been able to stick to that training the last 2 weeks before the taper. But then another part of me feels like maybe it was a blessing in disguise. It was my first marathon. I got through the training and got through the race without any injuries whatsoever. So, I'm sure there were some benefits to it as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've talked to several moms and it's just, sometimes like you can't underestimate the power of trying to prioritize sleep over miles, even if the family's not sick. Like if maybe you're just running around, you're running ragged and you have a long run in, but you're just so tired, like sleep can be a benefit above the miles sometimes. So
yeah. And I think one of the biggest differences between marathon training and half marathon training, at least for me, is marathon training is a lot more about time on your feet versus even meeting a specific mileage, like for long runs and stuff. I feel like for half marathons, you have to get 10 miles in. Doesn't matter how fast or slow or running. But for a full marathon, once you're on your feet for close to 3 hours, if you keep going after that in a training run, you're not going to get any more fitness benefits anyway. You're going to start to break your muscles down. So those days where you're on your feet and you're running around and you're really exhausted and you end up walking a total of, 20,000 steps or whatever, I wouldn't call it training, but it's time on your feet, And yeah, I would say if you're tired at the end of the day after that, you kind of earned your sleep over your 3 miles or your 5K training run for the night.
Right. No, that's a good point. And I know too, I often will talk to beginning marathons and they might hear that they're supposed to do at least a 20-mile run or, whatever they've heard from, like, I feel like 20 miles is something that a lot of people have in their mind, but that's another good point for people starting out. I mean, you don't have to, and maybe you don't want to do 20 miles if you're going to be on your feet for a lot longer to be able to do that. Right. So
yeah. I mean, that would have taken me at my easy run training pace. It would have taken me like 4 hours and some, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. So I never topped 16 for a long training run because there's not any benefit to it after 2.5, 3 hours or so.
Right. And I mean, I have to say, I am guilty of like mentally wanting that 20 miler in when I run. But you know, I've talked to a lot of even faster runners, more experienced runners, and a lot of them have told me that like more recently they've done more like an 18 miler as their longest run, but just have it be a picking that a quality 18 mile run, and they're not running for, you know, as long as even I would be running when they're doing that 18 miler, but a quality 18 miler over a 20 mile run for that like last good, you know, more intense workout is something that's helped them get a PR. So yeah, we don't have to be so obsessed with the miles, I guess is the point there. Hi friends, it's Catherine, and I'm rudely interrupting the conversation here because, as I mentioned in the beginning, Courtney and I talked for a while, and based on the feedback I've been getting from those of you who have shared it, trying to keep episodes closer to 15 minutes. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and you'll hear the second half of our conversation tomorrow. During that part of our conversation, we'll talk about Courtney's experience with the Pittsburgh Marathon itself, and then what is going to be next for Courtney, her next race plans, and lessons she learned during that first marathon that she'll apply to future races. Thanks so much for listening. If you subscribe, I will chat with you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Fit 15. For show notes and more, visit fitarmadillo.com/podcast. See you next time.